Hey there, Eli here, and I wanted to go over a couple more things, just follow up with some additional information because I got a number of comments and some people reaching out to me that they were still confused after my last video. If you haven't watched my Atlas Once and For All video, I'd recommend you go do that now because I'm not going to recover everything that I went over there. I'm just going to clarify a couple things and go through a few examples that maybe will help people out a little bit more. The first of two things that I wanted to correct was I had an example where we ran a Defile Cathedral map, and due to killing the boss, which allows you to get +2 map tiers to drop, and our bonus objectives, which gives you, after 100%, gives you a guaranteed bonus tier upgrade, I was saying that you could get a Fields map, which is tier 9, or Underground River tier 9, if you had nothing else on the Atlas completed. This is actually incorrect because while a boss can drop +2 tier and the bonus objective says a map drop is at least 1 tier higher, +2 is the maximum. The only way around this is if a map drops corrupted and then gets +1 from there. So you would kill a boss in a tier 6, it drops a tier 8, and it drops corrupted due to a number of potential mechanics, and that corruption yields a +1 to map level, and that gives you a tier 9. Secondly, with the favoriting system, I said that it gives you a 10% increased chance for that specific map to drop that you favorite. It's actually 10 times. It's a 10 times multiplier. So if you picked Atoll map in Haywark Hamlet 3 times as your favorite, that map would be 30 times more likely to drop. Well, let's go back to my first example that I had in the other video, which is we had just started the league and we just killed our first Conqueror in Lex over here in this corner. And I recommended putting 1 Watchstone in Lex Proxima. Why did I suggest putting 1 Watchstone in Lex Proxima? In a practical sense, you can put this first Watchstone in any of the 4 inner zones, and it will probably be fine. From my perspective, it makes sense to do this because the corner zones have a higher base tier for their map tiers than the inner zones. So while you are maybe finishing out Lexajoris, if you decide to do that, you do have some room for adjacent maps to drop. See, we have tier 4s here, tier 5 connected to a 7, tier 4 connected to a 6. We have 2 tier 4s connected to the 6 right here. That means we can start getting adjacent drops of yellow tier maps that we need for one of our 4 inner zones. And while we're finishing up our objective bonuses in Lexajoris, we can also buy maps from Xana, which hopefully have some in Lex Proxima in the tier 4 and higher category, so that we can start building our map pool in Lex Proxima to get adjacent maps to protect ourselves against RNG. Essentially, that's what we're trying to do with the Leapfrog strategy. We're trying to protect ourselves from RNG. The worst thing that could possibly happen is that we run out of maps to run at the right tier that we want. As far as worst possible things happening, it's really not that bad, but for a smooth league start and getting to 130, 140 objective bonus, getting into sustainable red tier maps, this is what we want. So while we are making our way to the other 3 corners, we have this one zone with as many valid maps, as in maps that we've killed the boss in, as possible, so we can start building our map collection for when we want to farm just Lex Proxima for 4 more Watchstones. And this is why we're banking our other 3 Watchstones at the very start here and just having 1 in Lex Proxima, because if we throw in another Watchstone here, another Watchstone here, and we have a 4th in Valdo's Rest, now we have all of these tier 5s and tier 6s and tier 7s. All of these, as we, progress and play the game, if we're maybe not being 100% attentive, or maybe we need that objective bonus and we want to get that as soon as possible, every time we complete one of these tier 5, 6s, and 7s, these now have a higher general chance, as we're playing the game, to drop in these zones that we're not super interested right off the bat. What we really want is to stockpile as many maps as possible in Lex Proxima while we are obtaining our first 4 Watchstones. Either way, understanding the Leapfrog strategy is really understanding the setup and knowing how the Atlas determines which maps to drop, which is what I covered in my previous video. Now let's take out these extra ones here. We're going to go ahead and put 2, and we're going to stop here at this example, but I want to get here so that maybe it's more clear than it was before. This is the next step in the Leapfrog, so at this point, at least theoretically, we've stockpiled a bunch of Lex Proxima maps that are tier 4 through 7, and if we want to, we could place our fourth one into one of our corner zones. I'd actually picked Hawork Hamlet in my example, because again, as we're running maps, we are buying from Xana whenever we need to, and as we complete more objective bonuses, she will have higher tier maps. Hopefully some of them will be in Tyrn's End, and if we have Tyrn's End maps that we eventually run, we'll be getting adjacent maps in Hawork Hamlet, which further gives us just more natural drop chances for maps that we maybe need. But because Tyrn's End has 2 watchstones, the highest tiers that are valid on our atlas are only going to be in Tyrn's End. So anytime one of these maps would drop in this tier range, they have to drop in Tyrn's End. That's the whole underlying purpose of the Leapfrog strategy, of understanding the mechanics behind the atlas itself, which quickly summed up is really any map that is valid and showing on your atlas, which means any map that you have killed the boss of and you have enough watchstones currently socketed into the citadel in a region for that map tier to show, is a valid map that the atlas could pick to drop, assuming the monster that you're killing or the mechanic you're engaging in can drop a map of that tier. And this goes back to the white mobs can drop the same tier map, the blue and yellow mobs can drop 1 tier above, and boss monsters, unique monsters, can drop 2 tiers above. Additionally, when you're gaining extra watchstones from Lex Proxima, as you can see, if we're moving on to Tyrn's End, we have 4 additional watchstones. What we could do is we could throw in 1 watchstone around the map while we're running Tyrn's End, because again, the thing that we want to make sure is happening is that our highest tier maps can only drop in the zone that we're focused on. And the zone we're focused on is the one where we still need to collect watchstones from the Conquerors. And the easiest way to do this, up until we fight Cyrus for the first time, is to do this Leapfrog strategy of killing the Watchstone Conquerors in the 4 inner zones. Once we fight Cyrus for the first time, as I went over in the other video, utilizing a combination of the Maven 10 boss battles and fighting Conquerors that can still drop watchstones is the most efficient way to get to Awakening level 8, or just buying craftable watchstones if you have a method that doesn't require you to continue to farm the atlas in that way anymore and you're just generating currency. That's fine too. But I'm all about giving people options, and that's why this video exists. So once we've completed our Lex Proxima farming, we've obtained all 4, and we have our 2 watchstones in here, we've been gathering maps for Tyrn's End, then what you could do is you could put 1 watchstone in these other 3 corner zones, and put 1 in Glench Cairns and 1 in Valdos Rest, and leave the 1 in Lex Proxima. What does this do for our potential map pool that can drop? So for our tier 9s, no, tier 8s, we have 1 tier 8 in Tyrn's End. That's okay, because we have a bunch active out here, so if we were to kill the boss of this tier of map out here in these corner zones, then, and a couple in Glench Cairns, then those could drop too. And of course in this adjacent map here, the factory, that can drop into Glench Cairns. But more importantly here, we look at our tier 9s, there's even fewer in these outer zones. Most of these tier 9s are going to drop in here, and then tier 10s are only going to be in Tyrn's End. So why would we do this? Why would we allow for potentially other maps to drop outside of this zone if we're following the Leapfrog strategy, which says we want to target farm the 1 area on the atlas where we can still get watchstones from the Conquerors? Well, one reason you might do it is to up your Awakening level. The Awakening level increases your odds that the map boss will drop an additional map that is adjacent to the map that you're running. Now, on top of this minuscule chance for an adjacent map to drop as an extra, you might put 1 watchstone in all of these 4 corner zones in order to make it so that white tier maps of the lowest tier can't drop as soon as possible. This would play into the map equity system, where if a map would have dropped but it can't, in this case because that map tier doesn't exist on the atlas, so your tier 1s, for example, don't exist here, there's no valid tier 1 map. Let's say the game was going to drop one, now the map equity system kicks in and gives us some unknown bonus that will, in the future, give us a higher tier map. Now, I've spoken with Karv about the map equity system and how noticeable it is between having it active and not active. He tells me, in his experience, that it is very noticeable when there are lower tier maps that can't drop in terms of how it affects your ability to drop higher tier maps. We haven't had extensive discussion about it and poured through the data or done a large scale test on it, but at this point in time, I would say if you want to follow this route and eliminate the lowest tier maps on your atlas as soon as possible, and you don't mind having a couple extra maps potentially dropping in zones that you might not specifically want in that moment, I'd say go for it. It's probably worthwhile to eliminate the lower tier maps as soon as possible on the atlas. But on the other hand, in a practical sense, if you want the other side of the coin, I played this league and last league just kind of traveling around the atlas, mostly at random, without any real strategy. And obtaining 150, 151 of bonus objectives and getting to red tier maps really was not a big deal. As long as you're abusing the Xana map pool that she has and running Xana master missions as soon as possible when you've depleted her map pool that you can buy from her. Remember, she's over here, and she has different tier maps depending on what your map completion bonus is. So running the master missions to reset this pool and buying them as soon as possible, I had no issues. So is it absolutely necessary to follow the Leapfrog strategy to an exact T as a streamer or content creator puts it out to you? Not really. What's far more important is that A, your build can get to red tier maps reliably, and B, that you understand just how the Atlas picks maps to drop. Because that's all the Leapfrog strategy is just understanding how the Atlas drops maps and then bending it to be in our favor a little bit. Now, switching gears just slightly, I want to fill in my Atlas with some more watchstones, and here we go. So this is a common setup when you get into the later parts of your Atlas progression. Right now, I can easily have Awakening level 8 if I would want to, but instead I am target farming Haywork Hamlet. This is where understanding the Atlas mechanics really serves us, because I'm saying I want to only farm Haywork Hamlet, so I'm going to unlock all 3 of my favorites, which I haven't personally done here, and I'm going to rotate those 3 favorited maps around as my map supply deems it necessary. So if I'm running low on palace maps, then I will favor that, maybe double favorite it for a few maps and get more of those. All the while, as you can see here, I'm highlighting tier 14s. Only tier 14, 15, and 16s can drop in Haywork Hamlet. This setup can be manipulated for any zone on the Atlas, and the highest you can get while doing this is Awakening level 5 or Awakening level 6 if you take the Uncharted Realms Atlas passive. This is how I personally manipulate my Atlas throughout the league when I am looking at specific areas to farm. If I wanted to, I could throw in an additional stone over here in Valdo's Rest in case I wanted to do some June farming and Syndicate related farming. Then I could be dropping maps in between Valdo's Rest and Haywork Hamlet in this kind of setup. But this really is the goal of these 2 videos, is to help you understand how the Atlas is picking and choosing maps to drop, so that you can say, I only want to run whatever zone you want to run, and then bend the Atlas to our will a little bit to allow us to sustain those maps for as long as possible. So that's it for this video. I hope that this additional set of examples helped you kind of understand what the reasoning is for why we're doing what we're doing with the Watchstone strategy, with our Leapfrog strategy, and how to make the Atlas work for you a little bit more than against you. If you have more questions, reach out to me here on YouTube, on the Reddit, on my Discord, it's linked below. Hit subscribe if you haven't, that helps me out a lot. And until next time, this is Eli, signing off.